Hey, what is going on, everyone? This is Mohammed, your personal PMP coach from Certified with Ease, coming back to you guys with another brand new video. In this video, we are going to solve 10 tricky questions that will help you prepare for the PMP exam. Okay, so put your phone on silent, pay attention to these questions, pay attention to the concept, to the way we approach these problems. Before we begin, if you want to download my free PMP Fast Track Workbook, download it in the description below. Put your email in because I plan on sending a personal invite to my PMP community group soon once it is officially launched. Okay, so in a couple of weeks, you'll get that invite. So make sure you sign up. All right. So enough said, let's start these questions right now. Remember, we have 3 steps and 3 steps only. The first step is to simply frame the problem. So you want to read the problem in a way where you understand the problem statement. Number 2, eliminate the answers that contradict our principles or that do not solve the core problem. And number 3, choose the answer that completely solves it, okay? All right, so during a sprint review, a product owner expresses concern that a critical feature being developed may not meet regulatory compliance requirements. The project manager immediately conducts a risk assessment with the team and finds that the compliance risks were not explicitly accounted for in the risk register. However, while discussing mitigation strategies, a senior developer mentions that they had already raised this concern in an earlier email, but never received a response. Okay. So here's the thing. The problem statement is simply at the end of the question. Right over here. Never received a response. And this question is tricky because it starts mentioning risk, risk response, mitigation. So your mind is stuck on this concept of risk. So we know that there's this feature, it didn't meet regulatory compliance requirements. The PM immediately conducts a risk assessment, right? So the risk assessment was already conducted and finds out the compliance risks were not explicitly accounted for, okay? But at the end, we have our problem statement. Anyways, let's look at the answers. Update the risk register with the compliance issue and develop a mitigation plan. Now, I'm going to just leave this for now, okay? I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to leave it. Escalate. So this is principle number 8. We never want to escalate, right? Escalate the compliance risk to the senior management for immediate resolution. So we can eliminate this. Review the communications management plan to determine why the developer's concerns was not addressed. Let's just leave this for now. Come back to it. Hold an emergency risk workshop to reassess all project risks related to compliance. Okay, now this doesn't solve the core problem. Now you might think, okay, you know what, take a step back, reassess, but hey, listen, we have already assessed the risk, right? We did a risk assessment. So this is redundant. We're doing it again. So we don't want to do that. Now, the reason why I highlighted A was because naturally you would think that, you know what, we need to update the risk register with the compliance issue, and we need to develop a mitigation plan. Now, why? Because the question says that the compliance risks were not explicitly accounted for in the risk register. But if we continue the question, we see that a senior developer mentioned that they had already raised the concern, meaning that they've put the concern in the risk register. Now, here's the problem statement. The problem statement is that there's something wrong with communications because there was no response. So the best answer here is going to be C. Okay, that's going to be your answer. Remember, the question becomes so much clearer when you understand what the actual problem is. And that is the number one reason, or one of the reasons why people get the answers wrong. It's easy to remember the principles. It's difficult to read a problem and try to truly understand what the problem is. Okay, let us move on. So a project team is working on developing a new software system for a financial institute. During risk review meetings, the project manager and team identify several potential security threats that could impact the system. The team begins to discuss potential mitigation strategies. However, a business analyst points out that the legal department has already issued strict security requirements, and the project is expected to comply with them fully. What should the project manager do first? Okay. So you have your team. Your team starts to basically look into mitigation strategies. However, the business analyst over here, now business analyst is an important role for your project, so make sure you understand what the role of a business analyst is. The business analyst comes along and says, you know what, we already have strict security requirements. So what should we do? Okay. Document the identified security threats in the risk register and implement mitigation plans. Okay. Consult the legal and compliance teams to verify whether these risks are already accounted for in the project requirements. All right, that makes sense. The team wants to have some mitigation plans put into place. However, we already know the strict security requirements. So it makes sense to look at these requirements and look at our risk and see if they've been accounted for, right? Implement additional layer of security testing to prevent potential security breaches. Okay, so does this answer the core problem? Does it? We're talking about, just complying with these security requirements, right? It doesn't really solve the problem. We need to address this issue of complying with these security requirements, at the same time making sure that our risks are handled. Update the project charter. So I'm going to just cross out C, doesn't solve the problem, to reflect the increased security risk. So that doesn't solve anything, right? We have two things right now we have to take care of. We have our risks and we have this new security compliance regulations. So again, the business analyst points out the legal department has already issued strict security requirements and the project is expected to comply with them. However, we know that the team has identified several potential security threats that could impact the system. These are risks. So we have to look back and we have to say, you know what? Are our risk accounted for in the project requirements? So we consult legal and compliance teams to verify whether these risks are already accounted for in the project requirements. If not, then we need to figure out another maybe set of regulations or whatnot. Okay? And the best people to contact are going to be the legal and the compliance teams, right? And remember, at the end of the day, they're not your direct team. However, they are still considered stakeholders. Anyone who directly or indirectly influences the project is a stakeholder, right? So you want to take a step back and discuss the issue with them. Okay, awesome. A manufacturing project is in its execution phase when a supplier informs the project manager that raw materials will be delayed by 3 weeks. The team starts to discuss alternative suppliers to mitigate the risk. However, a procurement specialist mentions that a secondary supplier was already approved in the contract. Okay, we have a delay. Delays are extremely dangerous for projects. Why? I'm going to say this again. This is a real life thing. When you have a delay in a project, you have to pay your suppliers more, or pay your suppliers for the lost time. You have to pay your employees more. You have to pay maybe your contractors, equipment costs. There's a lot of costs that build up, and at the end of the day, your client is probably going to be pissed off that the project is delayed. So the team now starts to discuss alternative suppliers. Okay, why? Because the raw materials will be delayed, right? So it makes sense to go to your suppliers or try to search for a new one. However, a procurement specialist mentions that a secondary supplier has been approved. Okay? That is what I want you to focus on. Secondary supplier was already approved in the contract. Remember, guys, contracts are written in blood. What do I mean by that? I mean that you need to respect what's in the contract. You need to respect what has been signed off on. You'll see this a lot for predictive projects because predictive projects, They heavily depend on resources, so it makes sense to sign off on a contract that will utilize this resource, right? Okay, so what should the project manager do first? Update the risk register and initiate a risk response planning with the team. I mean, technically you could do that because we are experiencing a delay. But again, it doesn't address this part over here, the second part. Okay, what about the secondary supplier? Do we just ignore this person? Do we just ignore this company? So I'm going to leave this. I'm not going to cross it out for now. Escalate the issue to the procurement department for supplier negotiations. So again, it makes sense to actually escalate the issue to the procurement department. However, they're the ones who actually told us that a secondary supplier was already approved. So what are we negotiating? This doesn't solve the problem. If we go to the suppliers and we go to the procurement department and we say that, hey, can you negotiate a supplier for us? They'll be like, hey, are you crazy? What are you talking about? We already have a secondary supplier. Activate the secondary supplier agreement as outlined in the contract. Okay, that makes sense. Reassess the project schedule to determine the delay impact before taking action. Now, a lot of you are going to choose this. This is taking a step back. Reassess the project schedule to determine the delay impact before taking action. But guys, if you read the problem, we know the delay impact. The delay impact is that our raw materials will not be delivered on time. We'll be delayed by 3 weeks. If we don't get our raw materials, we're not going to be able to do things. So this is a step that is not needed. Okay? Now remember, use the principles that I've mentioned in my videos. However, read the problem as well, right? That's your first step. Understand what the problem is. The principles are not there to magically give you the answer. At times they do, but the principles are there to complement your understanding so that you can choose the best answer. Okay, so you still got to read the problem to understand what's going on, right? Which is pretty ironic because I know that a lot of times in my videos, I will just choose the answer. But anyways, that comes with practice. So the best answer here is going to be C. Always follow the contracts. Always follow the contracts. If you have an agreement with someone and it's signed off in the contract, go for it. Go for it. Okay? What's implied here is that the procurement specialists or the procurement department did their job already. They assessed the situation. They know who the supplier is. They're the procurement department. They're the best people to ask. So they did all the heavy lifting and they approved the secondary supplier in the contract. Okay? So that's the best thing. Remember, always follow your contracts. Extremely, extremely important. Let's move on to the next problem. A software development project is progressing well when a stakeholder raises concerns about potential cybersecurity threats. The PM conducts a risk assessment and identifies security vulnerabilities. However, the IT security team informs the project manager that a security audit is already scheduled for the next phase of the project. Okay, so we just conducted a risk assessment. And now I got to work on my handwriting, guys. Risk assessment. And from this risk assessment, we know that there are vulnerabilities. Okay? We know that there's vulnerabilities. And so we take these vulnerabilities now and we bring it to the IT department. The IT security team informs the project manager that a security audit is already scheduled, meaning that these vulnerabilities are going to be addressed. Okay? Now that is our situation. What is our problem statement? Okay, what should the project manager do next? So the project manager now knows that, we have these vulnerabilities, we have these, we have a security audit that's coming up. What should I do with this information as a project manager? We need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to eliminate the risk associated with these vulnerabilities. Immediately implement security patches to address the vulnerabilities. One thing over here, guys, is that when you see an answer that says immediately or do something very hastily, eliminate that answer. Okay? Eliminate that. But on a more logical basis, A does not address the fact that there's going to be a security audit. So it doesn't take that piece of information into consideration. Update the risk register and implement a mitigation plan. Okay, we could do that. We can update the risk register, but wouldn't it be a little bit better if we actually went through with the security audit and then from there gather the information required and then have a mitigation plan? C, confirm with the IT security team whether the audit will address the identified vulnerabilities. I like that. I like that because if it does, then we're all on board. We can go with the audit. If it doesn't, then we need to reassess. Escalate the issue to senior management, request additional security resources. So no, we don't want extra resources that cost more money, right? And we don't want to escalate things. So D is gone. I'm going to go with C. C is a good answer. Confirm. And if it does, after that, do what you got to do. All right. Awesome. Let's move on to the next problem. A critical project milestone is at risk due to an unexpected regulatory change. The project manager is considering risk response strategies with senior compliance officer. When a senior compliance officer states that the organization has been tracking this regulatory change for months and has already adjusted policies accordingly. What should the project manager do first? Okay, so we have the situation where we have a risk. Okay, bottom line, we have a risk. We need to make sure this risk doesn't become an issue. The project manager is considering a risk response strategy with when a senior compliance officer states that the organization has been tracking this regulatory change for months and has already adjusted the policies accordingly. Okay. What should we do? So we have a situation where the senior officer has adjusted the policies accordingly, and we have this risk that we need to make sure it doesn't become an issue. Update the risk register and create a mitigation plan. Okay. Hold a risk workshop with the team to assess the impact of the regulatory change. All right. That's not bad. You take a step back, right? Confirm with the compliance team whether the policy adjustments fully address the regulatory change. Okay. Request additional time from the sponsor to reassess project compliance requirements. Okay. So automatically we can eliminate D. Requesting additional time implies a delay, even more than what we already expecting. And we don't go to the sponsor, right? We leave the sponsor out of this. D is gone. Okay. Now, usually when you're left with a couple of answers and you can't really eliminate them, it's about prioritizing what's going to come first. And you see the question over here. It says clearly, what should the project manager do first? The first thing I would do as a project manager in this situation, I would confirm the compliance team, with the compliance team, whether the policy adjustment fully addressed the regulatory change. We have this risk over here that we're dealing with. If we see that the risk associated with the unexpected regulatory change are addressed in the policy adjustments, we're good to go for the most part, right? So I would do that first, 100%. I would confirm that. And then what I would do is I would do B, assess the impact of the risk. Let's say C doesn't work out. Let's say C, there's a gap. There's still a gap. Let's say the policy adjustments don't fully address the regulatory change. I would do B. I would assess the impact and then I would do A. Okay? So the sequence here, guys, very important. C, B, A. Okay? Remember, a lot of students, I've spoken to a lot of students, I've met a lot of students on a one-to-one call to assess their situation, to help them out. And by the way, if you're interested in that, then sign up for the fast track workbook in the description and you'll get an invite to a strategy session, or you can book an appointment. It's at the end of the page. But anyways, they tell me that hey, Mohammed, like I'm stuck. I eliminate some answers and I'm stuck with 2 options or 3 options. I don't know which one to pick. I always tell them it's about prioritizing. What are you going to pick first? Okay. If all of them seem to solve the problem, what is the first action that you would take? Especially if they say, what should the PM do first? Okay. Very important. That's an indication. First or next is an indication of needing to prioritize. All right. Okay, let's move on. A key component of a construction project is delayed due to unexpected weather conditions. The PM assesses alternative solutions, but a team member mentions that the project contingency budget already includes allowance for weather-related delays. Okay. So when they mention information like this, the question is pushing you to use that piece of information. We have this situation where there's unexpected delays because of the weather, and the project manager is assessing alternative options. But the team member comes along and says that, hey, we have it in the contingency budget. We have weather-related delays in the contingency budget. The question is literally telling you to choose the answer that considers this contingency budget. Let's just see what's going on with the answers. Request additional budget to cover the delay. So we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that, right? We have the contingency budget. We don't need to request additional budget. Escalate the issue to the sponsor and suggest a schedule extension. Nope. No sponsor and no delays. We don't like delays. We're already delayed. We're already delayed. Why put a delay on another delay? Implement the contingency plan and monitor its effectiveness. Beautiful. I think that's the answer. But let's just read the last one. Reassign workers to different tasks while waiting for better conditions. Doesn't solve the problem, right? We want to implement the contingency plan and monitor its effectiveness. Why? Because we accounted for it in our budget. The contingency budget is that, right? It's the budget that you allocate or you put to the side just in case something unexpectedly materializes. And this is something that you'll see a lot in predictive projects. Okay. Awesome. Why? Because predictive projects are predictive. You can kind of tell what you're going to need extra money for. A project launch is scheduled in 3 weeks, but a key market research study has not yet been completed. So this seems like to be a problem statement. The project manager is evaluating the risk when a marketing director mentions that the study was conducted in a previous project and its findings are still relevant. All right. So we didn't do a key market research study, but the director comes along and says that, hey, something similar has been done in the past and the results are still relevant. I don't know what the problem here is going to be because everything seems to be checking out, but let's just see what's going on. It's been scheduled in 3 weeks. Okay, fine. Proceed with the product launch as planned since the study has already been conducted. Okay. Commission a new study to ensure updated market insights. Why a new study? If the marketing director mentions that the study was conducted in a previous project and its findings are still relevant, why do B? B is gone. Update the risk register and initiate a mitigation plan for the study delay. But again, we already mentioned that the marketing director has stated that the study has been done. C is gone. Delay the launch. No. Okay, so A is the answer. I don't really like A that much. Proceed with the product launch as planned since the study has already been conducted. Now, we should proceed with the product launch though. Okay? We should proceed. I just don't like how it's phrased. We should proceed with the product launch because this is clearly an agile project. And in an agile project, it is okay. It is fine if you don't have all the pieces together. Proceed one step at a time, assess your situation, and then refine. That is the very nature of a agile project, okay? So A is going to be the best answer, but remember, we're trying to understand the concept behind it. If you looked at A and you thought, oh, it sounds like a good answer, that's the answer, that's great. On the other hand, if you looked at A and you told yourself, you know what, it's an agile project, this fits the agile framework, you're more than good, right? You've understood the concepts in the underlying answer. Okay, very important. Remember, I don't want to hear this in the comments, guys. These questions are too easy. We're not focusing on the question. We're focusing on the underlying reason as to why the answer is such. We're focused on framing the problem, understanding how to read a problem, understanding how to eliminate answers, okay? That's what's going to really help you on the PMP exam. Anyways, let's move on. An agile team working on a mobile app identifies a risk that a key feature may not perform well on certain devices. The team is considering delaying the development to conduct more extensive testing. However, the PO points out that an early beta version is scheduled to be released for user feedback in the next iteration. And honestly, guys, that's what you want, right? No, I'm not going to write it, but this is what we want. Yeah, for an agile project, uncertainty is a key ingredient. So having a beta version, having a demo, and then assessing it from customer feedback is very, very important, okay? So what should the project manager do next? I'm just going to think on the top of my head. I didn't look at the answers, but the project manager should proceed with the release to gather this feedback. Delay the development to conduct additional testing before release? No. Never delay. Very important. Update the risk register and develop a mitigation plan for device compatibility issues? No. No need to update the risk register. This is not a risk, right? We want this feedback. We want to use this in our question. Proceed with the beta release and use real user feedback to assess performance risk. Very good, awesome. Hire additional testers to expand testing efforts. No. Okay. Additional testers cost more. We don't want that. C is the best answer, right? Pretty easy, but again, understand the concepts. One of our key principles is that one of the tools that the PMP loves to use a lot are demos or MVPs, right? Same thing. So on your exam, you're not going to see beta version. You're going to see demos or MVPs. Very, very important. Minimal viable products. Or you'll see minimal viable features. Awesome. A PM is leading a large-scale infrastructure project for a government agency. Now, what we're going to do is, I don't really care about this. Not important. During a stakeholder review meeting, a city official expresses concerns about potential environmental risks that could lead to regulatory penalties if not addressed. Okay. That gives our problem statement. We have these potential risks that could lead to penalties. Okay. If the risks are not addressed, they're going to equal to penalties. Okay. Let's just continue reading. There's a whole bulk of the question left. The PM reviews the risk register and finds that the environmental risks were previously identified and the mitigation strategies were approved. However, after the meeting, a team member mentions that recent changes to environmental laws may require additional compliance measures that were not included in the original risk response plan. The PM is now faced with uncertainty regarding whether the existing mitigation strategies are sufficient. What should the project manager do next? Simple. The second part of the question tries to confuse you. Second part where it says that the PM reviews the risk register and finds that environmental risks were previously identified. What follows takes precedence because the team member comes along and says, hey, no, things have changed. So we still have to go back and assess these risks somehow. This question was made in order for you to really understand what the problem statement is. Understand that. Go back to read it. Understand how to read a question to identify the problem. What should the PM do next, okay? So we got this word next here again. We might have to prioritize. Let's just see. Immediately update the risk register and create a new mitigation plan for the environmental risk. No, right? We don't want to do that. Immediately it's not a good word. We want to take a step back, but we don't want to immediately update the risk register. Okay? The risks that we have, they might all be addressed. Okay? Escalate the issue to senior management and request a legal review. No escalation. Verify whether the recent legal changes have already been addressed by the compliance team before making any decisions. Okay. So we have this team member that comes along and says that the recent change to environmental laws may require additional compliance measures. So this is a good starting point. Pause the project work on affected areas until the environmental risks. Okay. We don't want to pause or delay. This is gone. Okay. C is your best answer. This is a good question, not because of the answers. The answers are pretty straightforward. It's a good question because it tests your reading ability and your understanding of the problem. All right, next question over here, last one. A PM is overseeing the implementation of a new enterprise resource planning system, ERP, for a multinational company. So you notice how the first sentence is always the framing of the situation, which is not important, right? This could be implementation of another type of software. It could be anything else, right? So you can almost completely on your exam ignore the first sentence. Obviously read it just in case, but you can always ignore it most of the time. The project is in the testing phase and a major risk has been identified. The integration between the ERP system and the company's existing financial software is producing inconsistent data. Okay. What do I get from this? We got a big risk. The risk is inconsistent data. I don't really care for now, at least. I got to see the answers, but I don't really care that, there's a what is it called? A gap between our ERP system and the existing financial software. The project team begins to discuss risk mitigation strategies, including rewriting parts of the integration code or purchasing additional middleware to correct the issue. Okay, fine. However, a senior finance executive who recently joined the project mentions that a past system upgrade encounters similar integration problems, and lessons learned from that project were documented. Very important. We did this before. Lessons learned were documented. The executive is unsure whether those lessons were considered when planning the current ERP system. What should the project manager do next? We got a risk, and we might have some valuable information on how to handle this risk in the lessons learned register. What should we do? Update the risk register and implement the middleware solution. Why middleware, right? Out of all the solutions, why middleware? How does this option consider this over here? Lessons learned. Review the lessons learned register from past projects to determine if the same issue was previously encountered and resolved. Yeah, 100%. That's what we want to do. Request an emergency budget to allocate additional resources for rewriting the integration code. So there's no such thing as an emergency budget. This should be called contingency budget, but I don't think it's referring to the contingency budget. It's referring to something separate. So we don't want to spend extra money, right? So this is going to be gone because we don't want to spend extra money. But anyways, even if it was in the contingency budget, it doesn't mean that you just spend it, right? B is going to be a better solution in this case. Proceed with the planned mitigation efforts and conduct additional testing to validate results. Okay. So no, we don't really need to do that because we already know they've mentioned that, you know what, there is a major risk. It has been identified, right? It's not maybe, it has been identified. Best answer here is going to be B. Okay. Awesome, guys. So 10 questions. Remember, you have to develop this ability to read and to really draw out the core problem from reading the questions. Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and sign up for the fast track workbook in the description. I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a fantastic rest of the day.